So yeah, hello again. I welcome you on stage and on screen. Hello, Sonia. I'm happy to
Hello.
discuss with you the topic of wholesale CBDC. That is a very relevant one, I guess, because we heard already today that there might be some use cases which will be future-driven. And yeah, I would like my dear panelists, the experts on this subject, to introduce themselves. Sonia, do you want to start?
Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie, and thank you very much to the DEA for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Apologies that I can't be there in person, but always a pleasure to participate in your events. I'm Sonia Davidovich. I am currently with the BIS Innovation Hub Singapore Center, and I'm the center's digital assets lead. All the while, I'm on leave from the International Monetary Fund. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. We continue with you, Thomas.
Thank you, Anna. I'm Thomas Wisbach from Deutsche Börse. I'm working there in a specific team called New Digital Markets. It was founded roughly 5 years ago with a focus on looking at new technologies like DLT and blockchain. Our current focus is in the direction of the issuance, of the digital issuance of securities and lifecycle management of those securities. And as such, we look into the usage of central registers and as well decentral registers. Thank you.
Thank you. Oliver, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Oliver Sigrist. I'm a senior economist at the Swiss National Bank. I'm currently involved mostly in project Helvetia Phase 3. We'll talk about that in a minute. And in more questions more broadly related to wholesale CBDC. Before this assignment, I was part of the Innovation Hub, so I know Sonia quite well. So we actually worked together in one of the past projects that were published by the Innovation Hub.
Thank you. Amar.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. Great to be here. My name is Amar. I lead the digital assets team in Europe at Goldman Sachs, so extremely focused on everything we're doing with regards to blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies as a whole. But my specific focus is tokenization, digital money. And, we've had the pleasure of working with multiple different central banks over the last 4 years since our team came into existence, sort of as part of the proof of concepts and the trials. So it's very exciting to be here, especially as this year I think we can all see things moving into real life use cases.
Great, thank you. Sonia, the BIS is conducting several projects around the topic of wholesale CBDC. Could you give a short intro to the projects, looking at what challenge they address, and why did you prioritize these challenges?
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. I think for us at the BIS Innovation Hub, specifically in the Singapore Center, but in the Swiss Center, as Oliver mentioned, we worked on one particular wholesale CBDC project together. It is all about cracking the cross-border payments nut, or for most part, it's about what we live and breathe as part of our project work, because we're guided by the framework to enhance cross-border payments that has been issued by the G20 a couple of years ago. So that's kind of what is our main motivation or main the book that we adhere to for all of our projects, or most of our projects, I should say. So in the wholesale CBDC space specifically, I think that Project Mariana that Oliver and I worked on together is looking at a fundamental building block of cross-border payments, namely foreign exchange trading and settlement. And there the question in particular is, how do we think about FX trading and settlement in a tokenized world where we see a larger tokenization of financial assets, but also real world assets? How do we enable and enhance the way FX is traded and settled across borders? What novel concepts can we reuse there? And Project Mariana was pioneering the use of automated market makers to move the needle on how foreign exchange is done. So that's one project. We have also as another important building block of cross-border payments, which is compliance with regulatory and policy measures, working currently on Project Mandala. And Project Mandala is trying to embed policy and regulatory measures for participating jurisdictions and trying through that setup or through the solution architecture enable a more automated compliance process for the stakeholders that are involved, but also to enable central banks to improve their compliance monitoring. Because a lot of times in jurisdictions where there are capital controls in place, for example, there is no ability for central banks to monitor compliance with these measures. So Mandala is tackling a core building block of cross-border payments in the compliance space. Other projects that we have worked on as part of the BIS Innovation Hub also include delivery versus payment or payment versus payment use cases. Most notably, we have platform designs as part of Project Enbridge or Project Dunbar. Then we have other interoperability models like hub and spoke models that have been investigated as part of the of Project Icebreaker, more on the retail side of things, but still very relevant as it's showing different ways of how architectures can be built to enable specific use cases like payment versus payment in the cross-border payment space. So I think at the hub, it's fair to say that we're in the phase now where we're moving past proving the technical feasibility of multi-CBDC, multi-wholesale CBDC payment arrangements. And we're now looking at fundamental building blocks like foreign exchange, like policy and regulatory compliance, and also one important area that other projects are tackling, governance frameworks that set up a modus operandi for how these cross-border arrangements are governed.
Thank you so much. Thomas, the European Central Bank is calling their settlement activities wholesale settlements on DLT, not wholesale CBDC, and published a call for application for the trials. One of the trials is based on a project Deutsche Börse and Bundesbank worked on together, the trigger solution. What was the purpose of the project? How did you address the challenges? And please describe the solution.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, as I said, we are in charge since 5-6 years on the topic, and basically we are very hands-on. So we look at what will happen to the infrastructure. Maybe we are currently providing what are new technologies, new ways of working to change this infrastructure. And for us, the national or the core thing was at the beginning that we look at the security. So we are a house providing services for securities, and the issuance is the native part where the security is created. So from our perspective, we looked at the topic, how do we create a security on a DLT? So this is the starting point for us. But then the next point, and this is why we are sitting here, we need cash. Usually you have transactions which you want to settle, and this is the so-called DVP, and we heard it already, delivery versus payment. And then for us, the natural step was that we get in touch with the central bank. I would say a majority of transactions is settled in central bank money, which we see. There's as well a lot of transactions in commercial bank money, but a big chunk of the settlement is central bank money, and we know about the importance for the market players. So at the end, we got back to the Bundesbank. We had some connectivity there set up already, and we discussed the topic, and we came to this idea of the trigger solution already. As you know now, it was mainly 4 years back. The execution of the project was in early 21, but we started 12, 15 months earlier, where we looked at how we can connect the digital security with the digital payment. So this was the basis to it. We had a couple of market participants supporting us there. We did some transactions at the time. I think at that time, we were a couple of years back in terms of the technology. Some things happened, so we had some considerations about what needs to change, and I think this is still on its way. So the technology is still evolving. We have still issues, but on the safe side, I think there's a lot of upsides we can earn with the technology, which we have to make use of. on the security side, on the payment side, and as well on the combined side, the DVP. So a lot of things to do. Let's tackle it.
Thank you. Oliver, SNB has been very active in the evolution of wholesale settlements with diverse partners, right? What did you focus on in the wholesale CBDC? What focus did you have with your projects, and what did you learn from these projects?
Okay, there is a lot to this question. So, I mean, why in the first place? Why wholesale CBDC? I mean, wholesale CBDC is something which could be considered a lot simpler than retail CBDC. It is kind of replicating the current world, the two-tiered financial system where financial intermediaries have access to central bank money, and these banks then provide access to credit-based money to the end users. Now, obviously, with this technological change, this might change, right? So, central bank money, as we know it today, which is typically circulating in RDGS systems, might not be sufficient to serve future use cases. And this is kind of where the work of the SNB started, the investigation started. And also, I mean, obviously, one of the big drivers of these investigations and then also of this practical work was driven also by SDX. We heard that before. So SDX is a financial market infrastructure licensed in Switzerland. They're running this DLT-based central securities depository. And the question is like, how do we settle these tokenized assets circulating on that platform with central bank money? And obviously, there are different ways to do that. Wholesale CBDC is one option. There are other ways to settle these financial transactions. And another one would be, and that is similar to what was just outlined before, is linking up a traditional RDGS system with a new DLT-based system. So now we investigated these different ways to settle tokenized assets in various projects. In early stages of the project, we looked at both ways to do that, so the RDGS link and wholesale CBDC. And then we also, and this is also one of the crucial aspects, I think, that triggered also our interest, is kind of making this realistic in the sense that, okay, how can we actually integrate these new kind of financial market infrastructures into current systems and processes? How do we establish interoperability? That was also a big part of our work. And then, as Sonia said, so we also kind of looked into other use cases of around wholesale CBDC and DLT. We looked into cross-border settlement of payment versus payment transactions. And now, actually, we are running this pilot, as Alexandre from SDX has already mentioned. So this is a pilot running from December last year to June this year, where we actually issue real wholesale CBDC to settle tokenized asset transaction. And this is also another crucial step towards understanding like the benefits and challenges of wholesale CBDC.
Thank you. Amar, taking the user perspective and listening to the challenges we just heard during the wholesale trials, do you experience these challenges, and what do you think of the solutions?
No, definitely. And I guess on the challenges, maybe just to touch on, I guess, the challenges we have in today's world, because I completely echo everything that was said, about the benefits and the why, the reason behind why we're trying to tackle this solution. And it really comes down to fragmentation and fragmented rails. And there's a really good paper, I think the BIS put out a few months ago, which actually had a graph on it, which shows all the RTGS systems globally and when they actually overlap with each other from an operating hours perspective. And for me, it's a really powerful graph to just show you how fragmented the world is today. And if you take it to the extreme levels of, let's say, FX swaps between Japanese yen and US dollars, and you're crossing those time zones, that is where a single rail, ideally a single rail, I know there's TBD whether we land at one solution, but that is from a theory perspective where the benefits really come in. And from a bank perspective, we definitely look at it and look at the inefficiencies in today's world, which typically, from an economic perspective, have an impact, be it from a liquidity holding or capital holding perspective, which obviously increase the cost of doing business. That is really where a lot of this technology and adding volume to this technology can really come in and have an impact, and the challenges it can solve. We've had the pleasure of working with the SNB and many of the other central banks as we've moved from proof of concepts through to sort of things in a more live environment. So when it comes to the challenges of implementing this new technology, I always sort of typically put them into three buckets. The first one, and I think the biggest one, is legal and regulatory considerations. And actually, sorry, I would preface that. I prefer to call these sort of hurdles because I think they're all workable things to solve. It just will require the time to get over them. But I'll give you an example from the CBDC, wholesale CBDC perspective. One of the big legal questions to answer and reg questions is, when I'm holding this on balance sheet, what do I call it? And again, I think that's going to be an easier question to answer in the context of working with central banks on wholesale CBDC. But that question applies applies to any form of digital money. If you look at a stablecoin and say, if I'm holding this on balance sheet, what do I call it? Do I call it the underlie behind it? Do I call it cash, et cetera, et cetera? Because there's a whole waterfall of knock-on consequences depending on what it legally sits as on balance sheet. So legal and reg for me is sort of the first hurdle to overcome. The second is on the technology side. And here I always say, I actually think DLT systems as we're using them at the moment, which are typically centralized with one party running all the nodes just to get things off the ground, when you use them in that form, the DLT is not the complicated part at all. I would say the complicated part is actually the backward integration into systems which have been used to running, be it on a batch process, systems which are all different, of course, between all institutions as well, and trying to find a way in which institutions can all plug into the same system and get there at, ideally a simultaneous time to be ready to trade. So I think we have a lot of very, very cool and very interesting questions to answer when we start having decentralized DLT networks and, the consensus algorithm actually playing a more important part. I think that then triggers legal and reg considerations again. But for now, I would say, to get things off the ground, for me, DLT isn't actually the harder part. It's existing systems and how they work. And then, sorry, just the last challenge I think there is probably sort of fragmented liquidity pools. And again, this is one that it's not going to be easy to overcome. But just to give a very micro example, if today there was a CBDC, wholesale CBDC available, and I needed to move fiat into an isolated location to hold wholesale CBDC, am I in theory day one, fragmenting my liquidity away? I may not have enough volume there to trade digital assets, so I need to move it back into my normal fiat account. When it's in that account in wholesale CBDC form, can I count it to my liquidity buffer? These are all things which, if the answer was no, it begins to add pain points and fragment liquidity. But equally, I think, working with central banks, I think there'll be easy ways to hopefully get to the right outcome there as well.
Okay. My next question is addressing the central bank representatives, Sonja and Oliver. We heard about the challenges in technology. Do you think that blockchain is the right solution for wholesale settlements? And if yes or no, why? Sonja, would you like to start?
Sure. So I'm a big proponent of choosing the technology only after the problem statement has been clearly defined. I think it's problematic if we're starting off any work or any initiative with the premise that it has to be one or another technological solutions. So I would say that that's a fundamental question. The choice of technology should come at the very last instance. One could argue, and I have many discussions, including with my former colleague who's sitting in the audience, about what actually constitutes a wholesale CBDC. Is a distinction part only that it's based on a DLT, or is it something else? In my view, it doesn't have to be a DLT-enabled system for it to be called a wholesale CBDC. There are many examples where other technological solutions have been used to achieve the same outcome, build the same product, a wholesale CBDC that is not based on DLT. I think case in point is the project by the Banco Central Filipinas that is developing a wholesale CBDC that is not DLT based. So I encourage all of us to keep an open mind as to DLT or not. Certainly, DLT can unlock a lot of functionalities that other more conventional technologies can't. But when you think about, for example, programmability or smart contracts, there's also non-DLT solutions that offer the same capability. And I really think that we should cast a wide net and explore all possible options when it comes to the choice of technology. So not to jump the gun and decide on a technology first before we have clearly defined a problem statement out of which we should then define the requirements, and then at the very last, the technology choice.
Thank you. Ali, what do you want to add on this?
Well, I can only echo what Sonja said. I think it's not for a central bank to decide on whether DLT or any particular technology is superior to some other technology. So when it comes to the SNB, the SNB is agnostic when it comes to the use of different technology. But it supports innovation that supports the fulfillment of its mandate. This is very clear, and this is also how the experimentation around CBDC and the current pilot can be seen. So clearly there may be benefits coming from DLT, but it is, I think, at the end of the day, it is also for the private sector to show how this technology is actually superior to some existing arrangements and systems.
Amar, what's your opinion on that?
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of other technologies that can actually help facilitate the same thing, right? We're seeing across the world, different central banks focus on upgrading RTGS systems, and then, to some extent, I think, even the trigger solution and, the link back to RTGS systems actually allows you to extract a lot of the benefits that we're working towards. Equally, I think there are things that DLT does give you, like precision, like ability to trade to the nearest minute. Now, that's not saying centralized non-DLT systems cannot be built to do that as well. But at least from a lot of the examples we've used, for example, at Goldman, we trade repo, intraday repo using blockchain technology with JP Morgan, and that the DLT network underneath that is what allows us to do things with precision to the nearest minute. So again, I think it is use case dependent, but definitely I agree with both that the answer isn't it has to be DLT. It should be, are we tackling what we set out to achieve?
Thank you. Yeah.
I like the idea of the problem statement, and maybe I can fuel in here a bit an idea, maybe from the indirect side, not on the payment side directly, but if I look at what the problem statement on a securities side could be, is that static data for digital or for securities is very much an issue in the current world, because it's each in segregated databases in the houses. So each participant, each company, each financial intermediary, each bank has its own static data of securities, and by nature they differ. I mean, it cannot be all the same. And now all of a sudden a corporate action starts and it's different results. And people who know what I'm talking about, they know that there are big losses involved as well. So if we come to the idea that we have one digital instrument only at the end of the day, and everybody's looking at the same digital instrument and does their corporate actions, we have a benefit. So this is the problem statement. On the security side, now just make the transfer. If now we talk about a coupon payment in that instance, I need a payment solution, and then I can make the way to the payment solution in the same digital instance. So in other words, if it is DLT, if it is a distributed database, I don't know today, but it should be something which is shared, which we can share, which we can all look at, that we have the same view at the digital instrument. And if we compare that and translate that into payments, then we have as well a reason why we should have payments on the same instance. I think that there we need to be closely combined in terms of technology we use. I think that connections from these new digital technologies to existent, I would say, legacy technologies, which are quite old sometimes, could be difficult. So we should look as well as solutions who are capable of connecting the two worlds, the securities and the payment.
Genau, taking up the payment aspect and also taking up the previous panels about Evonik, for example, saying we need something for business cases. We need money payment infrastructure for the business side. There's no, would wholesale settlements resolve that problem? And should more player get access to the wholesale settlements like industry or e-commerce provider? What do you think?
Yeah, I come from the wholesale side, so this is where I would like to start. And at the end of the day, I think it is important to have that available. My thought was that we have today already wholesale solutions for payments and we have retail solutions for payments. It's a difference, right? We understand that. And from that angle, I think we need to translate that as well into the digital world. So the discussion about the retail CBDC, I understand. I have my own opinion on that. I think wholesale is more important. There we need it. There we can make really benefit out of it. We heard the panel in the morning where there was as well some concerns raised about retail CBDC. I think on the wholesale side, it's less a question. We need it. And then how do we get there in the quickest way? I mean, the alternative is to look at private solutions, and the longer it takes until we have wholesale CBDC, the more room is to move into solutions on the private sector side. And with MiCA, we will see stable coins in Europe coming, and let's see who's first. As a service provider to the capital markets, I would say I'm a bit of agnostic. I would say whatever is first is good. But I see the need for wholesale CBDC definitely because my current business is to a big chunk as well settled in wholesale CBDC.
What is your opinion on that, Amar?
Yeah, no, so I definitely see the need for wholesale CBDC. I'm probably not qualified to answer the access to it point. I think it's always an interesting topic where who has access to central bank balance sheet is effectively the question. And I think it's a much broader macro question to answer because the knock-on implications, you know, we touched on them in one of the earlier panels about retail CBDC and commercial bank, the potential for commercial bank disintermediation. When you talk about access for wholesale CBDC, you know, you're magnifying that significantly, right? The funding impacts to the commercial banking sector could be significant, but the knock-on impacts to how credit moves around our economy could be even more significant. So I think that access point is a much broader question, unfortunately, to answer. But I do think, and I agree that, you know, even with the current, you know, we referenced the 2 tiers of money earlier, right? Even with that current construct and payments as they work today, if you have a wholesale CBDC, it is then with those who can access that wholesale CBDC, the onus is on them to downstream the efficiencies they get from settling between themselves in wholesale CBDC and actually make that available through wholesale payment offerings that they have to the broader sector, you know, like to corporates, you know, to treasurers of corporates. So I think, you know, the access question I think is a much bigger one to answer and could fundamentally change how we know the economy works today. But there's no reason for why with access as it is, you can't downstream the benefits if it's done right.
Okay, so who should answer the access question? The central bank?
Well, probably yes, but I'm certainly not in a position to talk about access to Swiss franc electronic central bank money. But certainly, I mean, this has been discussed widely in the BIS and more broadly. I mean, access to central bank money triggers a lot of policy questions. Nowadays, the current world as we know it, it's access to financial institutions and non-financial institutions, as we discussed before in the previous panel. Typically, they don't have access to electronic forms of central bank money, and I would guess that even if we were to introduce a wholesale CBDC, at some point this kind of structure would persist.
Thank you. Thank you for your insights. To close up, I have 3 short questions, and I ask you to answer them shortly. And afterwards, we open up for questions. On a scala from 1 to 10, where do we stand with the development of wholesale settlements when 0 is like no development at all and 10 is very high level one? Sonja, we start with you.
Okay, so one word answer, I would probably say we're at the 4.
Okay.
Because I think that there's a lot more potential that we still haven't unlocked. I think we're just at the very early stages. Maybe I would even say 3.5.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. How about you, Thomas?
Yeah, I think you set the benchmark already. If I would be positive today, I would say maybe a 5, but I'm more with Sonja to be somewhere between 3 and 4. Still early days. We see the trials and experiments of the central banks here in Europe this year, and then the question is what comes afterwards. So there is a long way to go.
Oliver?
For once, I'm not the conservative central banker. It seems I would say we are between a 2 and an 8. No, I mean, there is a lot of heterogeneity in this development, as we heard before, and I think some of the initiatives are very well advanced, while others are still in their starting position.
Okay, Amar.
I didn't want to put a number on it, but I'm going to go less than or equal to 5. I agree. I think progress has the potential to really accelerate. Now we're getting into live trials because we're going to see things happening in real life, test the benefits that we've put down from a theory perspective, and it has the potential to really help us accelerate.
Thank you. So next question. What topics still need to be researched before going into a live system? 1 or 2 words.
I think I mentioned the building blocks earlier for the cross-border payment space at the very least, which is our primary focus. So we need to do a lot more on FX settlement. We need to do a lot more on regulatory and policy compliance, and that's equally applicable to the domestic space as well as the international, the cross-border space. And we need to do a lot more in governance. Those are the 3 building blocks that we have to do a lot more on to be able to give it a higher ranking.
Yeah, I would add the topic of interoperability. That's for me the main topic. If we want to make it happen, then we need to know how we communicate with other systems. That's the main.
Yep, I can only repeat, it's interoperability, regulation, governance. That's the 3 keywords I would mention here.
And along with those, I think the decentralization component, like for me, is still the big, really exciting theory question out there. But you know, when you have a consensus algorithm in operation with multiple parties, when does settlement finality take place, et cetera, what are the bad outcomes, the good outcomes? And I think that's going to be a very interesting question to start tackling as we progress. Okay,
last question before we open up. What do you suggest? When will we see the first real-life system of wholesale settlements on DLT or wholesale CBDC? Sonja, we start with you again.
I mean, judging from the BIS CBDC survey, I think we're in the short term, but Oliver is probably better placed to answer that because SNB is like on the verge of it. So is MAS with their wholesale CBDC pilots. I'd say short term, the next 3 years.
Thomas?
Yes, those pilots and tests, I would see they are happening already, maybe even with real money, like we will see it this year, to have really a scalable solution which is there permanently. I would say we are well above the 3 years I heard already. I see it even further in the distance.
Thank you. Oliver?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we're currently running this pilot, which is running until the end of June. After the end of June, we'll certainly take some time to reflect on the learnings of the pilot. Certainly, this is not no commitment to further advance on wholesale CBDC settlements on SDX or on another platform. So it's hard to say like how we'll progress, because this will be an internal discussion, and it will need at the end of the day it will need a policy decision on whether and how to move forward with this topic.
Okay, Amar.
And maybe a slightly different, I would say with Finality launching in the UK in December, I would say that is what I look to as the first, still early stages, but first live example of settlement with wholesale, with a form of digital wholesale money, which is sat at the central bank. But then again, dependent on the trials that we're going to see this year for the timing outside of that.
Sounds great. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you. And we open up for questions. I know we have the lunch just like in front of the door. So yeah, but I guess it's still a very interesting topic. So I really would like to open up for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, plug it on? No, it does work. Thanks for the interesting discussion. What I feel is that the discussion around wholesale CBDC is always only focused on capital market settlement and delivery versus payment, right? And I was lucky enough to yesterday already talk to some colleagues from the Brazilian Central Bank. We're going to have a panel later on to also discuss this use case of around DREX, of a project that they have launched. And it goes way beyond that, right? So wholesale CBDC is ultimately the foundation to settle between different banks, where banks can then also issue tokenized deposits, for example, on top of that infrastructure. So Sonja, maybe a question to you is, what's your view on those wider initiatives that use wholesale CBDC for basically settlement between banks, but for any type of payments, right? So similar to how we currently do payments with real-time gross settlement systems, but leveraging new technology to build new ecosystems where many, many things can happen. So what's your view? Do you see some comparable projects, initiatives, concepts where wholesale CBDC is not only focused on capital markets use cases and DVP use cases?
I think that's a well-taken question. And when we talk to the commercial banks, especially for the cross-border payments context, payments are actually their number one operational focus. Like, so when the main challenges are in the payments space, particularly across borders. So I do think that we should be focused on that for the wholesale CBDC work that we're doing. And our BIS Innovation Hub projects have a number of multilateral or multi-CBDC platforms that are looking at payments versus payment use cases, most notably Project Dunbar that was run out of the Singapore Center that was looking exactly at payment PVP use cases specifically. And if you, again, talk to the commercial banks who are the main stakeholders for this, they will tell you that payments are what they actually care about most. And whatever setup we have, whether it's a platform or a hub and spoke, whatever the interoperability model is, it's very important that we just stick to the pain points, so the main challenges or the main business operational focus that commercial banks have. So the number one use case for banks, especially in the cross-border context, is payments. So I agree that we should be keeping that right front and center when we're thinking about designing wholesale CBDC arrangements.
Are there more questions? In the back, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Eugene Kuznetsov, DAIP Limited, Hong Kong. Can you please, Sonia, tell about, you mentioned market makers as a way of interoperability. So my question is, market makers is a great way, but when the market is quite stable and when it's not stable, there are lack of great volumes of bids or offers. How do you think of the future of market makers as a way of interoperability?
That's a question for myself and Oliver alike, because Oliver was working with me on Project Mariana that was looking at that. And one of the findings from the project report, the concluding report that we issued in September last year, was exactly that like lots of liquidity is required for liquidity pools and automated makers to function properly. I think we're including some examples in the report that'll give you a sense of magnitude, but I think that that is like one particular obstacle that might be difficult to overcome for the use of AMMs for cross-border payments. Same goes for the pre-funded model that is a significant deviation from what the status quo is, where there's like tightly managed liquidity that commercial banks are handling, especially for their foreign exchange. So a lot of work is needed to be able to make AMMs workable especially for the wholesale CBDC cross-border settlement context. I don't know that we have a ready answer, but all I can say is that at the BS Innovation Hub, we're exploring and more work is unfolding specifically on how to improve foreign exchange settlement so that we can move the needle there on the core building block that needs to be solved if we want to see progress for cross-border payments. So AMMs is just one of the explorations that we're conducting. And the report nicely outlined all of the things that we still need to explore, that we need to invest more time on to be able to make this workable in the real world. I don't know if Oliver wants to add anything to it, given that we both worked on this project.
No, that's fine. So I mean, just to give a very short answer, I mean, the main focus of the project was to kind of prove feasibility, and this is it's kind of obvious because it's already out and it's already kind of battle tested in the DeFi space. But still, I think for the central banking community, it was still important to kind of learn about possible applications of novel arrangements such as automated market makers in the space of like regulated finance using wholesale CBDCs. So it doesn't go into these viability questions, and I think this is one of the big question marks that are still out and that would be interesting to further investigate.
Thank you. I think we can continue the discussion during lunchtime. Yeah, and thank you very much for this interesting discussion. Thank you.